Hi guys, Pastor Gary here, and I wanted to share a few thoughts with you back where we were at on Sunday in Luke's Gospel, chapter 23. You know, it was here that I asked a few questions. I started out by asking if there had ever been a time when what you said was completely misunderstood, where what you said and what you meant maybe were not only misunderstood, but they were taken completely opposite of what you had intended. Oh, then I asked another question. I said, how about a time when maybe you've been completely flooded and overwhelmed with financial problems or the loss of possessions, maybe a feeling like you're being swept away by some sort of raging flood and there's nothing to hold on to, or a time when you're being carried off in a torrent and you're incapable of even slowing, let alone stopping it. Or maybe there's been a time when you've been caught up in a fiery trial. Oh, it's a hardship of life where you wish you could just call the USS Enterprise and say, beam me up, Scotty, there's no intelligent life here on this planet. Well, sometimes the idea of an existence on a planet far, far away that's free from other people is not necessarily a bad thought. Or how about a time when it seems like everybody that you know is turning against you, or even your friends have turned and put you in line for a beating or to be spit on, and you're trying to do everything right, but it just doesn't come out that way. It seems like the harder that you try, the worse things get. Folks, I got to tell you that I can relate to those things, but more so than that, God can relate to those things. It's for this very reason that God has given us so many examples and he records of what's happened to other people in Scripture time and time again that demonstrates and shows us not only that God knows, but that he has walked through and brought through others before us, and we can look in Scripture and see how it is that God has sustained them and how he has brought them through. I mean, it may be in a case where we would cry out, Lord, I can't stand this fiery trial. Lord, I'm under such persecution. I can't believe I feel like I'm going to be just burned up in this hardship of life. And he would say, wait. Have you talked to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Let me show you their story because these guys know something about going into a fiery furnace. Let's look and see what faith did for them to bring them through this. Or maybe it would be, Lord, I'm being swept away by this torrent of floods of life and finances and problems and issues and concerns. And every time that I turn around, it feels like everything is just being washed out from underneath me. He would say, hey, let me introduce you to my good friend Noah. You see, Noah is an expert on navigating the floods of life. As a matter of fact, let's look and see what trusting in me brought Noah through. Oh, Lord, you don't understand suffering and affliction. Lord, you don't realize what I'm going through. Lord, I can't get a grip on any of these things that are happening within my life. There is just so much that's out of line, so much injustice. The Lord would say, have you considered my servant Job? Oh, see, Job was the poster boy for that which was being done to him that was unfair. But yet through it all, what Job said was, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job went on to say, why should I just expect the good things from God and not the bad things? God doesn't change. And the Lord would say, take a look at Job and see what happens when you persevere and you see the restoration that I bring to your life. Oh, and then we might say at times, Lord, I'm just so misunderstood. I'm being ridiculed. I'm being rejected. I'm hated and despised even by the people that I love the most. And God would look at us and I believe, take and warmly tell us, look to my Son, Jesus Christ. There's no better example of one who came in love, who came to save, who was rejected, who was hated, who was despised, who was misunderstood. It's through his example that we're able to take and able to see what it is that God has in store for us. And we saw in Luke's gospel in chapter 23 that as the multitude brought him before Pilate, that the things that they brought against him were all lies, that Jesus was accused of being a revolutionary, of perverting the nation, that he was supposedly speaking against the Roman government. He had forbidden his followers to pay taxes according to the accusations that were brought. Jesus had supposedly put himself in opposition to Caesar by declaring himself to be the king of the Jews, none of which was true. We know the only charge that was brought against him by the Sanhedrin was one of blasphemy. But they also knew that that charge would not get them any mileage in a Roman court. So they brought the lies. And in the midst of being lied about, in the midst of being misunderstood, in the midst of having all of these accusations and oppositions and being despised, Jesus chose to stand silent before his accusers. Oh, believe me, one of the hardest things that we're ever going to do when we're under attack is to be quiet or to say nothing. Over the years, I've struggled with this in my personal as well as in ministry life, that there's times when people will say things, and you know what, I'm really good at coming back. I mean, I want to be the one that would shortcut that, or would take and cut the legs out of an accusation or a misunderstanding, to the point to where the things that people are saying that would come against me or that would hurt me or my family or even this ministry, it would be a time for me to take and just really lay them out, man, and just really go for it. And rather than trusting the Lord, I start planning a strategy of attack. And what would I say? And rather than thinking about what would Jesus do or what did Jesus do, I start thinking about what can Gary do to fix this situation. Oh, what I found, though, is that we can never win against somebody that has already set an agenda or already made up their mind to oppose. And as a matter of fact, in the end, to try to give back what they're giving only creates more strife, more heartache. You see, it was Jesus and seeing his abuse that causes us to understand that in his innocence, that he showed us the right way. You see, Jesus was trusting the plan of the Father. Jesus knew that he had drawn close to God, that he was in the will of the Father, that he was totally submitted to them. And so therefore, the things that were happening to Jesus were happening in full view of God. And because of that, it was part of God's plan. And so Jesus chose to trust rather than to defend himself. Now, Jesus could have. Now, we know that Jesus, throughout Scripture, when the Pharisees would come and try to trick him or try to trip him up, man, he would just fillet them, man. He would just give them the answer that caused them to just have to be quiet and just shake their heads and say, wow, there's no way to trap this guy. So it wasn't a lack of ability, but what it was a matter of honoring the Father and allowing the suffering that God was going to bring upon Jesus Christ. And at times, folks, the suffering that he'll bring into our life, that will cause us to grow closer, that will cause us to grow through that which is in his plan. Oh, it doesn't mean that it won't hurt. As a matter of fact, a lot of times it's going to hurt real bad when those that are close to us will say things about us that aren't fair or aren't right or even aren't just. But we will have peace with God as we will take and lay our hearts before him and trust him to walk us through, and to do so in a way that brings him honor and brings him glory. Jesus paid a heavy price before Herod when he was silent, as Herod turned and abused him. And folks, at times there'll be the abuse that will come our way. But what I do know is that as God vindicated Christ, as God took and stood for the Son and brought him in through his plan, that God will do the same thing for us. He never leaves us. He never forsakes us. He brings us to the place of growing us through adversity and hardship for his plan, for his purpose. Our part, is to do what Jesus did, which is to yield our will to the Father, not engage. When there's a mind made up, when there's an agenda behind it, let it be, and let God rule and reign. Guys, I hope that you have a blessed week. Take and use this word of encouragement in order to be able to go out there and realize that at times people are going to say things that aren't right and aren't fair. Just trust God and know that if you're in his plan, that all things are going to work together for the good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. Hope to see you soon at Calvary Chapel, Dayton Valley. Come out and visit with us. Have a blessed and awesome week.